Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I am Vania Rosi Salsabila. In this video, I want to show you guys about my presentation of human rights. Human rights relate well to globalization and neoliberalism in addressing the recent global financial crisis, which has demonstrated the interdependence among peoples of the world and carries implications for social work practice. Based on Ellison in Encyclopedia of Violence, Peace, and Conflict, in 2nd edition 2008, human rights is about equality and non-discrimination. Human rights institutions have begun to address rights against discrimination based on various social attributes like race, gender, disability, and sexual orientation, which had previously been ignored because of their controversial nature. Racism has been a dominant concern in human rights institutions. Issues of racial superiority permeated the atmosphere even at early UN meetings. Delegates from Asia, Africa, and South America experienced discrimination. It was considered a great achievement when the Commission on Human Rights completed the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. Throughout the decades since the human rights machinery was established, concerns remained about social equality, economic disparities, and racial hierarchies. At the World Conference Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance held in Durban, South Africa in 2001, there was discussion of the devastating consequences of colonialism, particularly in Africa. The conference noted the predicament of indigenous peoples who have no real representation in the UN because it is state-centered. Apartheid and genocide were condemned as crimes against humanity. Although there were plans to discuss case, India lobbied against having this subject on the agenda. There was mention made of the special types of discrimination against women, children, individuals affected by HIV or AIDS. Although women's rights were traditionally relegated to the Commission on the Status of Women, which was set up at the same time as the Commission on Human Rights, in the 1990s human rights institutions began to embrace women's rights as well. In the 1990s, there was a movement to focus attention on the experience of women. The World Conference in Beijing, in conjunction with the publication of major works on women's rights as human rights, challenged the marginalization of women. At the same time, international institutions began to place more emphasis on violence against women. In 1993, the General Assembly adopted a declaration on the elimination of violence against women. Pressure was brought to include gender-specific violence such as mass rapes in the statutes at the ad hoc tribunals for the former Yugoslavia and for Rwanda, and in the statute for the Permanent International Criminal Court. The UN appointed a Special Rapporteur, Radhika Coomara-swamy, a distinguished Sri Lankan jurist, to document the global trends in violence against women, and she issued several reports on this subject. They show that the suffering of women takes many forms such as acid violence, honor killings, mass rapes, and trafficking in women and girls. Other special rapporteurs have continued to do fact-finding on these disturbing patterns of behavior. Tribunals have begun to recognize that violence against women constitutes violations of both international human rights law and the law of war. For instance, the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda in 1998 ruled in the AKSQ case that mass rape is a form of genocide. The Rome Statute of the ICC also incorporates this interpretation. In national context, because of increased awareness about the plight of women, Canada and the United States changed their immigration policies to permit women to seek political asylum on the basis of gender persecution. In the past, political persecution was construed as deliberate acts to harm women. In the 1990s, the failure of government to protect women from cultural traditions, such as female genital cutting, began to be considered grounds for political asylum. The landmark case in the United States that prompted the policy change was that of Fausia Kasinga from Togo. The U.S. government expanded its measure of human rights in the country reports to include violence against women, requiring amassing data on gender-specific violence. In the past, the predicament of women was that the violations of their rights took place in the private realm of family, religion, or culture, and thus were beyond the reach of the law. The trend toward holding governments accountable for the failure to protect women from harm perpetrated by private actors has helped break down the public or private distinction. The particular human rights issues affecting children received increasing attention at the end of the 20th century. The establishment of the International Journal on Children's Rights published innovative scholarship documenting the specific topics. Although jurists have carried out research on questions such as right to refuse medical treatment, child marriage, and the child soldier, scholars have begun to tackle even more difficult topics such as the specific rights of the children who are the result of mass rapes. The international community addressed minority groups whose concerns had been overlooked for a long time. For instance, a new treaty guarantees the rights of persons with disabilities, a group whose members have been among the most marginalized groups in society. Akiko Ito, Chief of the United Nations Global Programme on Disability in the Division of Social Policy and Development Chief, coordinated a series of meetings around the world to canvass experts and public about whether there was a need for a new treaty. The campaign culminated in the UN adoption of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in March 2007. The process of ratification is underway, and an international meeting with disability rights NGOs met in Seoul in September 2007 to discuss the prospects for implementation. Okay, that's all. Thank you guys for watching. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.